Hi, I'm Miss Julie, and welcome again to Riverside Kids Sunday School. We miss you guys a lot, and we're looking forward to the day that we can have Sunday school in person again. But until that's safe, we hope that these videos are helping you to grow and learn. So today, I'm going to start with a question. My question is, what makes a good leader? Probably a few different things could pop up into your mind. Maybe you think a good leader is somebody who's smart or knowledgeable. Maybe a good leader is somebody who's also a good speaker. I think a good leader is somebody who can kind of plan ahead and think about the goals they want that group to reach. A lot of people think a good leader is somebody who's strong. Maybe somebody who's a good fighter or warrior. Well, today in the books of the Bible that we're going to cover, we'll learn a lot about what makes a good leader. The books that we're going to be covering are 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. These are all in the Old Testament, kind of building on what we've been learning for the last few weeks about books of the Old Testament. So these 6 books cover a lot of the Bible. At least in the Bible that I'm looking at right now, it's about 200 pages. It goes from here to here. It's a pretty big chunk. So if I'm going to read these 200 pages, I better get going right now and read really fast, right? Well, of course, I'm not going to read these 200 pages to you, at least here. It would take quite a bit of time to look these over and study them. Instead, what we'll do is just give you a quick summary of the major points of these books. Let's start with 1st and 2nd Samuel. Samuel, by the way, was one of these judges that we learned about several weeks ago. A judge was somebody who helped the people solve disputes, but they weren't exactly like a king or a president. Now, the Israelites, God's people, notice that all the other people or countries around them had kings to lead them. And they cried out to Samuel for a king of their own. Now, God had been really leading them. He was the real king. But somehow the people didn't think God was good enough. God did warn the people that kings would bring suffering to Israel, that if they looked to a human king instead of God as the king, then bad things would happen. Still, the Israelites pleaded for an earthly king, kind of rejecting God. Let's look quickly at the book of 1 Samuel and go to chapter 8. And if you want to follow along, it's chapter 8, verse 6 and 7. It says, "But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, 'Give us a king to govern us.' Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, 'Listen to the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, God, from being king over them, just as they have done to me from the day that I brought them up out of Egypt to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So also they are doing to you.'" So basically, God is saying, the Israelites keep on rejecting me. So just let them have their earthly king, and then let them see what happens. So God did give the Israelites the king they wanted. And that first king was a guy named Saul. Saul was a tall, handsome man who at first did make a fine king. But eventually, Saul maybe got a little power hungry and disobeyed God and was basically kicked off the throne by God and replaced by a guy named David. David, you probably heard a lot of stories about him, like David and Goliath. It's the same David. David also messed up a few times, but his heart remained faithful to God. And indeed, under David, for the most part, Israel prospered or did very well. Also, later in the Bible, we'll see that one of the great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren of David was Jesus. Okay, so the main point we see in the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel is that Israel rejected God as their king, and God established some human kings in Israel. Saul ended up disobeying and not turning back to God. David, the other king there, also ended up disobeying and doing some bad things, but he did come back to God. Then let's move on to 1st and 2nd Kings. In this part of the Bible, we learn that King David passed the kingdom of Israel to his son Solomon. Again, Solomon started out as a pretty good king. He built a temple for God, and he was very wise. However, once again, Solomon did not remain committed to God. He really did kind of get off track. And as a result, God promised the kingdom of Israel would be divided. In other words, the kingdom would be split into two. So if you'd like to follow along in your Bible, let's just quickly read 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 11 through 13. And there it says, "Therefore the Lord said to Solomon, since this has been your mind, and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes that I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you and give it to your servant. Yet for the sake of your father David, I will not do it in your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hands of your son." So again, God is saying, hey, king, you messed up, and that there's going to be consequences. After Solomon's son Rehoboam became the kingdom of Israel was divided just as God had said. The northern part became known as Israel, and the southern part became known as Judah. Many who were kings after Solomon continued to really stray from the real God, and they worshiped false gods instead. After warning them, God punished them by allowing Israel to be taken captive by Assyria, which was a foreign kingdom, and Judah, or the southern kingdom, was taken captive by Babylon. So again, because Israel did not always follow God, their leaders weren't always committed to God, bad things happened. Particularly, they were overrun by foreign countries, and many of the people were kind of taken off to those foreign countries, kind of dragged away from their homes. Then we move to 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Chronicles, that's kind of a weird word. It just means order of events. So these two books give in order the history of a lot of the kings of Israel, including David and his descendants. 1st Chronicles kind of tells what happened or who the genealogy of David is. If you don't know what genealogy it just means a list of all David's ancestors, all the way starting from Adam, the first man, all the way down to King David. So 1st and 2nd Chronicles tell about David's reign again and how Solomon built the temple for the Lord. The family line was chosen to rule over Israel forever. And the temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, who took the people of Judah captive to Babylon. So all of that is told in 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Now, if the Israelites had chosen to stay committed to God, the captivity and exile really could have been avoided. We can make a commitment to serve God too. So here comes our memory verse for the day. It's from Joshua 24, verse 15. It says, "As for me and my house, we will choose to serve the Lord." That's the commitment that we should make. But unfortunately, not all the kings of Israel that we read about in these books made the same commitment. So, again, what can we learn from these parts of the Bible about what makes a good leader? Well, first of all, we know that God is the best leader. Now, we do have human leaders, of course. We just have to realize that those human leaders are not God. They make mistakes, even the best of them. They can get off track. And we find that they especially get off track when they have a lot of power. The best leaders, though, may make mistakes, but they remain committed to God. And that is the main word that I want you to remember from this lesson and focus on through the rest of the week. Commitment. So what does it mean to be committed to God? Everybody will probably have a somewhat different answer. What makes it difficult to be committed to God? Well, all of us, even if we're not a leader, can sometimes get off track. So we have to stay focused on God, stay committed to praying, to learning more about Him, to maybe hanging around people who will help us do that as well. And is there a particular time when being committed to God is most difficult? That's a really interesting question. Maybe it's most difficult when things are not going so well, when life isn't turning out the way you thought it would, when you're disappointed, you can't see your friends, you can't go to face-to-face school and all of that. But for some people, that makes them pray more. For some people, it might be harder to be committed when things are going well and that they think they're in control of everything and they kind of lose sight that God is really helping them. So think about this week how you can remain committed to God. Get ideas this week, but of course, if we only do it for a week, we're not really committed. Committed means making these decisions over a lifetime. Also, if you've never really committed to God before, if you've never received Jesus into your heart, then you can really do that anytime. You can do that right now just by talking to God and asking, hey, Lord, I want to be committed to you. I want Jesus in my heart, and I want to follow you all of my days. Maybe you have made that commitment before, but all of us need to remember. So you can wake up every morning and say, hey, God, I want to be committed to you.